Well, hello again, everybody, back here on Beyond Rooms 313. I have a return guest, had him on before, and a man whose work I have tremendous respect for. And it's David Halpin from Circle Stories. Many of you may know Circle Stories from uh, all kinds of social media. I think you're on both Facebook and Instagram. And
Yeah.
it's a tremendous resource, a tremendous casual resource, which is something I don't like about it. I wish it was more codified and accessible, like in a Wikipedia kind of way. But hopefully, David will work on a book or something one day. But he's a great archivist and modern folklorist of the Irish. Well, a lot of it has to do with the fairy tradition and the She and all that stuff, but also a lot of it centers around ancient sites. And he takes some very obscure stories. I've read some of your stuff. Some of your stuff you've done is really obscure, actually, in a good way. I mean, I'm glad where he's tapped into like resources like the phenomenal Dukas resource, which was an Irish government folklore archiving project from the 1930s, which has been it's probably the best of its kind in the world. And so you have at least one book out, I think. Do you have one book or more?
Well, thanks, Thomas, for having me back on the show. It's been a long time. Actually, that was the first time I met you was when I was giving a talk in Yvonne's Centre in Nice, and then later on, you gave a talk there as well. I went to see you, but yeah, like I mean, I have a couple of fiction books out, all right, but based on the same kind of thing, Fortean phenomena and so on. But yeah, as you say, circus stories, it's quite it's scattered, but that's just the way I write at the moment. Maybe I will put everything together into topics at some point. But I think because Irish fairy lore in itself is so connected to different areas from landscape, the psyche, consciousness, culture, that it's just the way it naturally progressed. You know yourself when you're writing about these subjects, you don't know where you may start off somewhere, but you don't know where you're going to end up.
We're both featured in, along with Kate Ray, who you were on here in the Hawthorne recently, in an upcoming film movie called Fae Folk. Is that the name of it?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. So that would be interesting to see. I know that, let's say myself, you, um, Kay, Michael Fortune, among others, were in it. So we don't know our own particular section, so that will be interesting to see. But like again, it's great to have all of these places featured. Funnily enough, one of the places that I took the crew to, is at Greeny Stone Circle, and now that's closed off to the public, which is very strange. It's something that seems to be happening more and more.
Yeah, we'll have a talk about this late again in a bit later on because I gave a talk about this recently in Boyle in County Roscommon, and it's becoming a worrying trend regarding access denied to ancient sites, and there's some quite disturbing developments regarding Rathcrogan and the Morrigan's Cave and some other places. But anyway, what I liked about your work and what drew me to your work, and and to a lesser extent, Kate and Dr. Neil Rushton, but mainly you because you were Irish, not because you were better, you were just Irish, was that you were the first Irish person I know who was coming at from the same Fortean angle that I was. That there was a much deeper thing here than sort of like, I'm not to disrespect people like Eddie Lenihan who've like added to this topic. You know, they've kept tremendous amounts of folklore alive, but it's still it's he was very much in the what you what you get on the tin is what it is kind of thing where you reviewed my book years ago, the Druid Code, and you were saying like, well, this is it. This is like the way we should look at things through a sort of like a mythological framework, almost a psychoanalytical framework. And so your stuff was the same. We're both interested in the cult and stuff like that, and Forteana. Uh, Personally, I find looking at fairy lore, I can't do it in any other way anymore. How do you feel? Tell us
Yeah,
about
yeah, absolutely. I think for myself, I grew up like in the 70s as a kid. So, there were magazines like The Unexplained, and then there was Arthur C. Clarke on the TV. And in some ways they seem so far away. And yet when I began to look at what these magazines and programs were talking about, it was very much for what you might connect to fairy lore, except we seem to have some kind of what I say, a separation from it. And I think that has a lot to do with our fear of taboo, whether that was imposed upon us or whether we were just a very superstitious people. I don't know. But the darkness of fairy lore wasn't really apparent in, as you say, the fairy stories that we were told. You know, they were very whimsical, and the fairies were twee. And yet when I began, and lots of other people as well, but began to go back into the art, they were human like the gentry looked on us as almost livestock. And I found that there's a coldness to them. And I don't know whether that was because they seen us as inferior. But then you looked at Wentz's book then later on, and you saw the same thing. And I guess for me then it was a case of let's explore this a bit further, and then you see the occult aspect of it, the offerings, the landscape, the time lapse, the idea that there's a separation of worlds, that dimensionally we may be sharing the same space, and yet we can't see them. And yet in the folklore, it does say that. It says they may be beside you and you just don't know it. So what does that mean? Is it some kind of quantum coding within the folklore? So it's all open, and it's there for everyone to explore, I think.
Yeah. Regarding the dark fairy thing, my grandmother and lots of people from her age, she was from the Midlands, from the bog, like the bog of Allen. She was
Yeah, yeah.
terrified of the fairies, and everyone I knew of her generation were terrified of the fairies. And I always made the assumption that this terror was rooted in a kind of a Christian reaction, because Eddie Lenihan even talks about how the fairies fell down from heaven with Lucifer, which is just,
Right.
that's just a story they've added to it. But I thought it came from that, but it wasn't until much later on that I started to look into work like Jacques Vallée's work, especially Passport to Magonia, and it took a guy who's a UFO researcher, mythologist, alien mythologist, whatever you want to call him, to really make me go, that's it. That's what he's talking. That's what they were afraid of. And then I remember I read Robert Ellman's biography of W.B. Yeats, which is a superb biography, by the way. And it talks about that play, The Land of Heart's Desire, where a bride is being led in a kind of a lesbian relationship into the fairy world by a female fairy. And the father heart, the character talks about, you'll live forever, but you'll never know mortal this. And then I said, oh, yes, it's dimensions. We're talking about different dimensions. The other world is another dimension, another dimension. And
Yeah.
so ever since then, it's not been anything else for me. It hasn't been anything else. But I will say this: it has become increasingly darker for me. Uh, I've gone from thinking that there was like good fairies and bad fairies to thinking now, in terms of the relationship with human beings, they're nearly all malevolent in Ireland anyway. Do you have any theories about why Irish fairies are dark and in England they're nice and friendly?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I think in Scottish lore you have that two court thing, the Seelie and the Unseelie, the good fairies and the bad fairies. In Ireland, there seems to be, like I said, it's almost like cats toying with mice at times, the way fairies treat human beings. Like people like that take them for no reason. They drive them mad. There's a particular story in Dukas where an old man lives in a house, and at the end of it just finishes with he was brought off to an asylum because the fairies just drove him mad for no reason. But then you hear, of course, where people build their houses on what we call fairy paths or spirit roads. And I wonder, are these energetic currents that maybe, as you allude to, the darkness there, maybe it's like a contamination, like someone playing with radiation and they don't know what it is, and it affects us in that way. Like Claude Lickatu talks about the kind of the infection that these specters and revenants bring, and he's talking about it in the same way. if we come in contact with these beings, it's damaging to us. And I often wonder as well, like when you think of biblical stories, say for example, Moses gone to the mountain and Yahweh said to him, "Don't come near me because you tell everyone to stay back. It's too dangerous." And then when he comes down, his face is shining radiantly. Like, what is that? That's a
Yeah,
physical impact upon the body.
yeah. You hear that in Marian apparitions as well. I think the Marian apparitions are very closely tied to, if you read, like we spoke about this before, the Fatima especially, that thing is nothing like how the film with Vincent Price portrays it. It's,
Yeah.
which is actually quite a good movie and everything, but it's that whole Fatima event is one unbelievable trip.
It really is. And when you look at the work of, I think it was Joachim Fernandez, Dr. Joachim Fernandez, was the guy, the Portuguese researcher who got the original parochial records. And that blew open Fatima because we saw for the first time what the children were saying before the Jesuits came in and told people to change their story. And like it was like a 3 foot tall uh, girl, blonde, bald,
Oh,
holding
yeah.
an orb, descend, descending from some kind of pearl-like saucer-like craft, or almost, and then the idea of the sun spinning in the sky, and then that was witnessed by people from miles away, as well as in the crowd. So when they say, "Oh no, it's this mass hypnosis event," that doesn't explain like people looking from miles away. Do you know what I mean? Even if you were to go down that avenue, which I don't.
Yeah, in Passport to Magonia, Jacques Villay talks about a guy who was something like 19 miles away, tending sheep in a field, and he saw the sun dance in the sky. And he was like a Protestant or something. He wasn't even a Catholic, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but well, the one that got me was how the thing rotated and made a buzzing noise, and that's classic like demonic manifestation. I'm just using it.
mhm,
I'm not upsetting Catholics. Don't get upset, but I'm just saying that's what happens in demonic manifestation. You hear an
yeah,
electronic static noise, and sometimes you smell arcing. You smell like
yeah,
electronic burning smells. But
yeah.
that's that to me is like, it's like I got to the stage now where it's nearly all the same thing. It probably is anyway, and yet it's just
Mhm.
cultural and technological sort of rationalizations are put onto it. You can take it in all kinds of directions. Now, the main reason that we have you here tonight, I have you here tonight, is David and I both grew up in Dublin, but we grew up on very different part. I grew up way up on the north side. He grew up way on the southwest side in Tallaght. But I did in the early 80s spend 1 year, a very unhappy year, living in Jobstown in West Tallaght. I wasn't getting on my folks or anything, so I was just kind of like that kind of like runaway stage. And I didn't like it because I felt like I was literally in darkest Africa compared to where I'd grown up. It just seemed so far away from Dublin. But having said that, I had a bicycle and I used to start exploring all the mountains. It's right on the mountains there. But interestingly enough, when I was living there, it was sort of like this, the town was developing into the foothills of the Dublin Mountains, and new estates were coming on. And I can remember one estate, I don't know, it was Cushnall or Killenarden Heights, where there was incredible poltergeist activity that had happened, and that would you would have been about a young kid as well, then, wouldn't you? I was,
Yeah,
I was,
I think that
I,
was
I was like
early.
18 or 19. I was. So what would you have been?
Yeah, yeah,
You'd
yeah.
be,
So like, I'm 55 now, so that was in the early 80s, I think. So I would have been about 12, but I do remember because I remember I think it was either the Herald or the Press, which were the two main newspapers at the time in Ireland, and they had stories about it. And there was a priest brought in, I think, to do exorcism. But what happened with that particular estate was that it was built like there were cairns, there were uh,
yep,
stone circles, there were standing stones, and God knows what else, like demolished in order to make way for these new estates. And of course, with these things, they tend to have this residual energy. Or we can have different theories, but like people are having rituals on these sites for thousands of years, and that's there, and suddenly it's like breaking open a genie's bottle. So that might be one explanation. But there were apparitions, there were people. hearing noises. There were lights over the estate, like very unusual lights, orbs, and so on. Voice phenomena. So it was a huge thing at the time. And yeah, as you rightly say, it was seen as demonic, but perhaps it was more a fairy phenomenon.
Well, I don't know if you saw my recent video about this egregoric tulpa kind of thing that manifested from your
Mhm.
life in Dublin. That's exactly where and when it happened. I was
Yeah,
waiting for the 77 bus stop right across from those estates on the side of the mountain. And at
yeah,
that time, that was the end of Tallaght. After that, there was like countryside all the way to like
yeah,
uh, the embankment and whatever, Nace, whatever. It was the wilderness. The streetlights ended,
yeah,
you know, and so like
yeah,
it was right there that night that happened, and I always felt spooked out living in that area for that year I was there, as well as fascinated because I really enjoyed cycling in the mountains and seeing the old sites and stuff like that. But I was just thinking about that. That's where that began at this time that all that stuff was going on. So obviously something had latched onto me or somehow onto my consciousness or I'd latched
yeah,
onto it. But
yeah.
it must have been when you were growing up, you must have went to visit a lot of these places too and heard like all kinds of stories.
Yeah. Well, we were chatting there during the week about Malachi Horan, who was a writer who lived on the top of Kilnarden Hill, and he includes in his biography lots of stories of fairy encounters, and I suppose phenomena that is now related to poltergeist and fairy and haunting and so on, like being trapped in a field, for example, not being able to find your way out, seeing strange beings, melodies, strange melodies, which, like, if you repeat them, are they ways to transport your consciousness into this particular dimension? We know from Irish folklore that fairies themselves teach people certain melodies, and they warn them not to pass on these songs or these tunes because they are almost like entrance ways, Aladdin's cave or whatever. That you play a melody and the doorway opens. But there's a book here. It's a hard one to get now. It's by a guy called Patrick Healy, but he basically went around Tallaght, South Dublin, and basically documented an awful lot of these stones and circles that are no longer there. And up until the 70s, like there was a 14 stone circle on Kilnarden Hill. It's gone now. But it
Yeah.
goes to show how that destruction happened. And of course, it makes you wonder then, was that the reason for this particular haunting?
If you go to the Ordnance Survey's historic environment viewer, you can look at the map, the earliest really high quality map, which is a 6-inch 1830 map, and it's perfectly aligned with the modern satellite maps, and you can see that right in. I think the where the heath or the little park area in Kilnarden is was actually it says Cromlech, and then you look around, it says Cromlech everywhere, Cromlech, Cromlech,
Yeah,
Cromlech,
yeah,
stone or men here, sometimes
yeah,
men. So that was a big area for antiquities, and they were plowed over and smashed up. The Malachi Horan book was a great read. I have it somewhere. I think the fairies took that one as well. I couldn't find it for this one, but he spoke about a road. Well, by the way, Tallaght, did you know, is the only place in Ireland, not fiction, real place in Ireland, named by H.P. Lovecraft, other than Dublin. It's in,
wow,
yeah,
very nice.
he names it in the Moonbog, and it's the only town in Ireland that is outside Dublin named by Lovecraft in a story is Tallaght.
There, there
Tallaght.
you go. Another claim to fame.
Good one though. But
Yeah, absolutely.
but in that Malachi Horan book, I remember and it must be about 30 odd years since I've read it. And I know it's a classic where you live, but where you're from. And there was a segment in it where he spoke about a road that went over the mountains that everybody avoided at night because if it was considered to be a dark, dangerous path filled with dangerous fairies. Do you know what road it
Mhm.
was?
Well, I think I was talking to a friend of mine who's recently moved to Balmascorney, and we reckon it's around that area. I think he calls it the Fairy Glen. And these paths, I think they're very much related to what we were speaking about earlier, spirit roads, fairy paths, and so on. And whether it's that there's some kind of energetic current which you may slip into, or whether, as some people believe, it's the actual movement of spirits or fairy forms themselves. The folklore tells us that if you get caught up in it, anything may befall you. You may be taken away, or you may be driven insane. You may end up, ill and die. So I can understand why Malachi Horan mentions it, because these were real fears for these people. It's very easy for us to look back at now and go, "Oh, look at them, the superstitious peasants who don't know what they're talking about." And yet, still, as we can see today, like people would still be very reluctant to knock down a hawthorn tree, build on land near a fairy fort and so on. So that's still very much there. And it's only there because there are real repercussions of disasters befalling people.
There's also a place that's like that is Massey's Wood, which is not far from there. I used to go camping there as a teenager, and that's an old mansion that had like all kinds of like aristocratic scandals associated with it. But there's quite a few court cairns in there that are still in good condition in the middle of the woods. But I can remember camping there as a teenager. I must have been about 15, 16, maybe younger. And we were sitting around the fire one night, and this woman dressed in a shawl carrying a baby walked by us like this. Like, and we said, "You okay, missus? Are you all right?" And she just walked by and went into the woods. No, she wasn't a
Wow.
spirit or anything. She was a solid woman, carrying a baby.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But that area down that I mean that's sort of area around Montpellier Hill, the Hellfire
yeah.
Club.
Empire
It's
Club and
very,
Kilkee House as well, of course, right beside it, which
yeah,
has,
absolutely.
lots of hauntings associated.
The only place I ever had that experience of being terrified is walking along the old military road, the one that goes from the behind there up towards Lugnaquilla. And I think it goes all the way
Yeah,
down to where you live now. It doesn't all the way to Wexford. It's a really long road.
yeah, yeah. And do you know what's really interesting is the amount of cairns on the top of all of these hills. You
Yeah,
know, like Slee, like you have Seafin, Sea Finnegan, Seaham, you have Montpellier Hill, as you say, and like you wonder why they're all in this uniformity. They're obviously connected,
yeah.
but it's not enough to just say, "Oh, would they buried the ancestors there?" Like these are like sea when Seafin was excavated, there were no remains found inside it.
No. And the whole thing of that were the kings in heaven and they're kind of like Neolithic Valhalla. No, they're too complex. The one that's up on the Hellfire Club, that was a double large cairn that was supposedly just as impressive as Newgrange. And of
Mhm.
course, they demolished that to build they took all the stones off it. I was up there about
Right.
6 or 7 years ago when they were excavating it, and the atmosphere was horrible. Oh my God, it nearly killed me. I
Yeah.
nearly was passing out when I got back into town. The energy was ferocious, and there was all these archaeological students digging in the trench, and they looked absolutely miserable. Like you could see that it was having some kind of negative effect on them.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you feel this yourself, but there are times when you go to a stone circle, for example, and you'll come away completely drained, and yet you may go back another time and be totally energized. And it's almost like these things are taken in and then emitting something. And if you're if you're there at the right time, it could be beneficial to you. But I do wonder if you're there at the wrong time, it can be detrimental to you, to your health.
Yeah, that suggests to me a technology that's connected to something, whether it's the sun or whether it's the earth or seasonal things. Well, it suggests to me that is, you see it a lot as like Loch Crew is definitely, you know, connected towards the sunrise in the east over the Irish Sea. It's the birthing kind of like cairns, and that the sun follows over Ireland. And you see it, it's the same with the opening the Boyne Valley. It's sort of like the birth canal of the rising sun, coming up there. Uh, it can't be just symbolic. There has to be something that, like if you read the Stars and the Stones and you look at these designs on the wall and you show Martin Brennan shows where the sun hit it. it almost looks like it's touching a circuit or something. Like some of the diagrams
Yeah,
on the petroglyphs and the rock art at Newgrange looks almost like it's tuning in signals and like like it's
yeah,
a
yeah.
technology.
Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that's very much like the Egyptian Seb head ritual, for example, where the king or the main shaman would have to know directions, directions through constellations, which would then somehow be a map within his own consciousness to bring him to the Duat or the place of the ancestors. And Irish archaeology, unfortunately, doesn't really consider these theories as being legitimate. You know, they prefer to see these sites as tombs, and that's all.
Yeah.
But really, to me, they're much more ceremonial and initiatory.
Well, the classic one is it was the one that Nouth was reopened by your man Rin and the team from I think it was Maynooth back in the 1950s. And his book is amazing. His description of actually breaking into the tomb and seeing all the incredible artwork. And they didn't find any bones. And then he declares it a grave dedicated to the wind to the I think the autumnal equinox. So I was like, what? You know?
Yeah. Unfortunately, lot of these academics, I think they were stuck in a situation where they weren't allowed to speculate in the same way. I'm sure, and I have heard stories, I'm sure you have too, that when you got some of these people on their own, they're much more open to different theories, but they couldn't publish anything like that, you
Oh no,
know?
this guy was a nutcat, a religious fanatic.
Right, right.
I was a Jesuit at Maynooth, and there's a very a paper it's online. You can actually read it from a book he wrote on the swastikas that are found around Ireland. And there was a debate like the Round Towers: is it pre-Christian, is it Christian?
Yes,
And
yes, yeah.
he surmises at the end that the crucifix is raised to the glory of Jesus Christ. You know,
Yeah. It's unbelievable. And do you know what? Like, I know you've written a book about the Round Tower, so you know this. But isn't it the case that it was only a show of hands that decided that the Round Towers were actually Christian constructions?
yeah, I've often thought it would make a fantastic movie. To be honest, it's about they had the Royal Irish Academy had in about 1790. They were arguing how old are these things? Are they Christian? Are they not? Now remember, most of them didn't have the conical cap on the top. That was all added in the Middle
Exactly,
Ages. If you see,
exactly.
even the one at Glendalough, because photographs of that with no conical cap. And
Right, right.
they went to the bottom during the restoration. They went 1890 or 1900. They tried to find the remains of the conical cap in the bottom. It wasn't there, so they put one on top anyway. But anyway, so they had a competition, the Royal Irish Academy, and there was a guy called O'Neill who wrote, and a few other guys. But this guy O'Neill wrote this. It's pretty out there and pretty wild. But he said that these were to do it. They were ancient towers related to Atlantis, and they were somehow connected to two. They Dannon, and he wrote this book on because it's wild and out there, but it was like it came second in the competition, and
Yeah,
the winning competition was they were Christian because most of them, not all of them, most of them were on the sites on monastic sites. But we know that from the early church letters that they were saying that, like, what was his name? Pope Benedict, not Pope Benedict, Boniface, was saying that go to the go to the lands of the heathens, don't demolish their temples; they're well made,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
just remove the unclean idols and sprinkle them with holy water because the locals are familiar with the site as a place of veneration. And that's the story around
yeah,
towers. I've no doubt about it. Because they're often like Kilmacdonough, it's even built in a different stone than the monastery, and so is Cashel.
yeah. And as you say, we do have that missive, and the Pope at the time was basically saying, go to these places, allow the people to continue to worship, as you say, replace their idols with our saints, and sure, look, it'll be grand, and before we know it, we'll be in place, and they'll be grand because they can still go to where they used to go. You know what I mean? Like, not that I think I spoke to you before. I'm also skeptical about the whole peaceful takeover. in Ireland when it comes to
Oh,
Christianity. I've no doubt that it was much more bloody, and we just don't have the evidence of it because people are dead.
and it took a hell of a lot longer. There's like hints all over the place, like the Book of Ballymote and other documents that talk about what are you still afraid of pagans for, as if they still existed, and this is those 1300s. But you go to somewhere like
Yeah,
Kilmacdonough down in the Burren there, and even in today in 2025, and you stand and you look at that round tower at the height of it, and the perfect stonework at the bottom, and you go, what the, like you're literally blown away by it. What must that have looked like in the Middle Ages? Like
yeah, yeah.
it's astonishing, really. And next door to that is a what they
And,
call,
and
sorry, quickly. Next door to that is a church
yeah,
that has that polygonal stonework on it, and the wall. It's the only one wall. I suspect that was the wall of the original pagan temple, and they
perhaps, yeah.
changed the orientation to east west to make it like a church.
Yeah, and the lack of documentation about it. These would have been things that they would have propagandized to a huge degree, and yet there's no account of them being built. I think there's one account of one being repaired in the annals, but that's all. Like there's nothing else.
There's also the story of like nearly all of them were destroyed in an earthquake at a time they weren't supposed to exist. That's another one.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, if any saint made one, he would have been celebrated as the builder. But they do have this character called the Gobon Ser and the Gobanu, and the Gobanu
yeah,
and Gobanu Ser. It's either the pagan smith. There's always a smith god in paganism, but he's also in the Catholic Christian world the one who built all the round towers and all that. So he's a mythical figure. But they just took the pagan thing and gave it a different name. They made him the god of the
yeah,
servant of the sky. But David, just talking about this, I sometimes feel like we're the survivors of a lost age. Like
definitely.
the world that we grew up in seems was so alien to the world we lived in today. And it's very easy to say, okay, the times have moved on and we're kind of like, we're obsolete now.
Yeah,
We're the outfitters. I don't think that's true at all. And I'll tell you why. There was definitely a lot more magic in the world when I was growing up, right up until the 1990s. And not just in Ireland. That's gone now. And I think me and you are an example of people who we both grew up in Dublin, but we both dived into this world because there was magical accessibility through things like bookshops and things like that.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I always remember like my nana and granddad used to live in Dominic Street, which is kind of slap bang in the middle of town. And we'd be coming home on a Sunday night, for example, and we'd be getting the bus at Abbey Street, and you had like the Curzon and the Cameo, I think it was, and they'd always have these horror movies or sci-fi cult movies. Do you know what I mean? And there was the Plaza Cinema as well, and those posters, they were so inspirational for making your imagination fertile. The artistry, you look at film posters today, it's not the same. Like these people had to convey what the movie was about. There was one there, I remember it was beach and a hand coming up out of sand, I think, and someone's face, and very, very occultish. And Carrie, for example, was one I always remember the poster for Carrie. It seemed to be on in the Curzon cinema for about a year. You know what I mean? And then, like, for a bookshop, the Alchemist's Head, and you'd be I was too young to really understand it, but you'd look in and you'd be like, oh my God, like, what's all this about, So definitely it was a different place. And we interacted with the world. We weren't absent. We weren't looking into our phones or, you know, eh, I don't know, thinking about social media. It was an environment that asked you to integrate with it, and we got so much from it.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Plaza because that was my nearest city centre cinema at the top of Dorset Street there, and I also had a friend who went to Cloister Wirra, the Irish school around the corner. It's closed now, and that's so we. I used to meet him after school, and we used to on Wednesdays he had like a schoolboy special. Whereas
Yeah,
it sounds like very illegal now, but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
meant if you were a student in secondary school, you could see movies for cheap. But what always struck me about right around there, you want to talk about folklore and hauntology, is the Black Church. That thing,
Oh yeah, yeah,
that thing that looks like a straight out of Mordor. That
that's right. Yeah.
I think it's like that was actually the old Western Road out of the city at one time, I believe. But the people who live in the
Do you
front
think?
right across from that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because like my nana used to tell us stories about it, and she'd say if you walk around, I think it was you walk around it 3 times and
And
hop on your foot, you'd see the devil. This kind of thing. There are loads of variations of that kind
oh
of
yeah,
story, you
and
know.
also there was a lane. I can't remember the name of it, but it was where Matt Talbot had the apparition that he saw.
That's right. Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
can remember, oh, I think I was going to Daily Mail to see a match or something. And I went down there one night and I was on my own, I was going back from the match. I was on my own and I was absolutely terrified. There was like this awful evil energy in the alleyway. And then I saw this,
Well,
this is where Matt Talbot, the S&M saint, saw the
yeah, yeah. And there was an old orphanage there as well, and it's now a building that belongs to Youth Work Ireland, I think. And the workers there have often they've seen children in the corridor. They tell you stories. Like I know someone who works there, and they've told me this. So very much a haunted area as well as you say. And the old Granby factory was there as well. Um, you know where that is, just before you come to the lane.
yes,
So
there
there was all,
was a pork and sausage factory.
yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
gosh, that's a long.
So
It's going back a bit now. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But all of that area is full of like the people coming back to fairies. People would say, oh, it's something from rural areas, but all that urban kind of city centre, all those people, they had fairy stories as well. Like they wouldn't throw the bathwater out without calling forth, telling the fairies to move out of the way. You know?
That whole area has that kind of haunting. Well, I don't know about now, but back when I was growing up, it was kind of weird around there at night. James Joyce's Ulysses takes place on Eccles Street, just around up Dorset Street, a little bit and around the corner, where Molly Bloom
Yeah, yeah,
soliloquy takes place. So
right.
it's a very historic place, you know. And
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And do you know what? Like, there's a section. I don't know whether you read From Hell by Alan Moore. It's a graphic novel, a big monster of a book. It's about Jack the Ripper. But he talks about the kind of that part of London was very much like that part of Dublin almost. And he talks about the land that the streets being so haunted by violence and by poverty that somehow it broke through the barriers of time. And there's a section in the book where a person is inside a house in the Victorian time. They're looking out on the modern world, and it's like time is meaningless. And so it's something that you mentioned earlier about reverbing actions, reverbing through time, reverberation through time, I should say,
stone.
in terms of the consciousness, you know.
Yeah,
But that also just gone off just on a bit of a tangent here because I remembered something I wanted to say to you when you were talking about dark fairy lore and landscape. I, but what do you think of Knock? Because Knock is a place that I always feel has a very sinister energy. It's a very Nigel Neal place in that it seems to be a repository for something malevolent. That's just coming back to what you were saying earlier on.
in Knock County Mayo.
Yeah, yeah,
That's just up here. I'm not far from the airport. Oh yes,
yeah, yeah,
Knock terrifies me. Uh, it's the basilica looks like something from Mordor 2 as well, but in the 1980s.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, that's a very unpleasant feeling in that. And in fact, that part of Mayo has a kind of it's also like it's got high deposits of uranium, and I often wondered if that was like part of the, around Kilmavie and stuff like that. That was part of
Mm.
what was causing this. But oh yeah, I mean, I find Knock terrifying. It's an awful energy. I want to get out of it as soon as I can. I just don't like.
Yeah, yeah.
I've often went back over the years, say if I was being unfair or being a bigot or something. But no, it's awful. It's just an awful place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think the energy there only takes the form of the whole Catholic. exterior. I think there's something much older there. Certainly in the folklore records, there's an awful lot of stories about your usual phenomena, orbs, sightings, ladies in white, predating this apparition, which I don't think was an apparition anyway. I think the local bishop, had some kind of magic lantern that he was using, but that can all be part of the trickster phenomenon. Who's to say that he wasn't being used by whatever this force is
Yeah, when I
himself?
heard about the magic lantern story projecting of images of the saints on the side of the building, I said, even that's interesting. What drove him to do
Yeah,
that?
exactly.
Force had him, if that's true, or they could have had him.
Yeah,
But another thing about that is, that famous Tolkien quote that like he feels there's something very evil under Ireland, and it was only the
yeah,
people that keep it at bay. I mean, when I saw that,
yeah.
have you seen that film, The Borderlands? It's set in England, where it's like a
It's
Lovecraftian.
brilliant film. Yeah, yeah,
I get that impression at Knock. There's like some kind of Lovecraftian demon under there, and all
yeah.
have to go there to appease it and feed the energy. That's how I
But
feel.
what's interesting? Over the last year or so, I became friends with someone on my cult book review page, and she was sending me covers of old Mercier press books that were coming out in the 50s, 60s, 70s in Ireland. And the amount of them that are channeling books is unbelievable. Like I was totally unaware that this was a whole phenomenon in Ireland. But, but when you talk about something dark and malevolent, like for
What
me, channeling is very much a way into that.
channeling books?
Channeling, no, people channeling forces and voices and saying that they were in touch with spirits and so on. And these were books
And Mercer Press were publishing these.
we're publishing them. Yeah, yeah,
What? But that's so not like Mercer Press. That's weird.
yeah. It's unbelievable that these books were out there, and the covers, of like seances and, you know, I don't know, people with apparitions behind them and so on. So there seems to have been an early precursor to Forteana. I don't know how well those books sold now, to be honest with you, but I'd imagine they must have been doing some business, or they must have had some kind of clientele to keep publishing.
Well, I have their witchcraft book, and I have one of their ghost stories of Ireland books. So they.
Yeah,
Well, what happened was in the 1980s, in the 1970s and 60s and 70s, the Evening Press newspaper, now long gone, used to run every Tuesday night a paranormal story. It was one of the most
right.
popular features in the newspaper. In fact, I used to couldn't wait for it as a kid when it came out on Tuesday nights. And I
Yeah,
think there was a I have even a video on this channel that shows like a UFO club in Dublin or Wexford or somewhere back in the 1970s. There definitely was a Fortean scene that wasn't well organized. In fact, a lot of
yeah,
people behind Fortean Times, a lot of them came out of Ireland or English living here at the time. They were
yeah.
part of the scene here. And something similar also happened in Cornwall as well, and Colin Wilson was actually involved in that. It's a shame we don't have enough more information on the Irish one, but I'd imagine this.
Yeah,
And they're probably all dead now. The guys, that were behind it, they would have been.
yeah, yeah,
They'd be like 90 at least. But
yeah,
I never considered that about no, I didn't know Knock had a prior paranormal reputation. It's all
yeah, yeah, yeah. But I suppose that's Ireland. Like it's what you're saying about what's underneath the land. If you go onto Dukas archives, everywhere you look it has some kind of archive of supernatural occurrences. And I often wonder, is it the remnants or the kind of desperate pleas of the local deities that were there at one point, trying to manifest themselves again and using the form that's most easy to appear into the people now living today, so they take the form of the Virgin Mary, for example, or a saint or whatever, this is just the way these things work, or is it something else? Who knows?
I tell you, it can be quite spooky at times when you're there and you start because I don't know, about 8 years ago I was at Creevy Queel, Court Cairn here in Sligo, which is right beside Mullaghmore, which is where classy born Mountbatten's Gothic castle is overlooking the bay, and you can see it from and at the entrance to the cairn is like a mini version of Newgrange. And it was
Yeah.
someone asked me to speak to a group of American tourists about it. So I stood up on top of the stone, and I was just saying that these are court cairns. And I looked out the sea, and honest to God, I was not joking. I came this close to doing the what's it called? The Hymn of the Great Cthulhu from Colin Wilson's The Book of Dead Names. It was like it wasn't like a troll. It was like I wanted to do it. It was
Yeah, 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 yeah,
but it feels like it's a thing to do now, as if there was some entity in the sea
yeah.
that was like wanted me to like bring them forth somehow in this.
Everything aligned. Yeah. But yeah, it's funny, but like as you mentioned earlier on, like Lovecraft using Tallaght in one of his works, which is incredible, and Lovecraft being someone that maybe I think we both would entertain the possibility that he somehow was in contact with some kind of force, if you like, or some through his dreams or through I don't know. So subliminally maybe initially, but then he was giving voice to whatever it was. And you look at the world today, and very much a lot of the what I say the cult people in terms of banking families and so on, they seem to be looking to the stars, and you'd often wonder, are they trying to summon things as well?
Oh, definitely. Like, well, that's no doubt about Lovecraft. That you read the letters that he's written to like Derelict and Howard, and he talks and Howard, of course, Conan and the Irish mythology and all that.
Yes, yeah,
But
yeah,
the he's no doubt that he says these are phantasms of like nocturnal slumber, and I'm not actually writing them. They're coming to visit me. They're not inventions.
yeah, yeah,
They're real.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
what I had to laugh. I went to Necronomicon in Providence a few years back, and it was all very open. Oh no, he never was. It was like talking to like it was very NPC-ish. It was, oh no, it's just purely fiction. Oh no, 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 he was a racist. Oh, all this nonsense.
yeah,
It's like it was so depressing to see the lack of imagination and the lack of no Fortean grounding. And they had these
yeah.
panels that were speaking, and they had one panel on paganism, and I went to it, and it was a Jesus Christ, it was a Wiccan woman from like Providence talking about episodes of the X Files.
Unbelievable. But like unfortunately, as you know yourself, you do have that kind of superficial Wiccan voice, which tends to try to represent paganism, and it's a problem for us, who take it, who see that it's not something that can be put out there in a very DEI way, dare I say it?
Oh yeah, I know. Now speaking of prohibitions, something awful is happening here at the moment. The Morrigan's Cave at Rathcrogan in County Roscommon, which the film crew that were both on Fey Folk went to visit. They can't visit now. Why? Because apparently the council have put a gate in front of the entrance, claiming that the CO2 levels inside the cave are too dangerous. And this is something we're seeing not just in Ireland, but more and more in Britain as well. They're restricting access to ancient sites. Is that going on around where you live down in Carlow area?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Carlo and Wicklow, as I mentioned before, at Greenstone Circle, which I took the crew to, is now closed off to the public. Also, Cadine, the pathway up to the cairn on Cadine is closed off now. You can still get up, but you have to go up through the forestry, which is a lot of people don't know about. I know as well that a mutual friend of ours, Denise, told me that the Hill Ward has a new gate on it as well. That could be something to do with this Puka festival coming up, but again, it's another kind of obstruction in the way. Seems to be happening everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, they're getting very snotty around at Loch Crew because of some vandalism. The vandalism was nothing. Someone wrote with chalk on it. It wasn't, but then they really sexed it up in the media to make it sound like the rock art has been destroyed. That rock art has been destroyed by neglect. by the
yeah,
government or
yeah,
since
yeah,
the foundation of the state. And they did things
yeah,
like take, like Lar Dooley says, they showed, when I was up there and he showed me, they took the lid off the cairns and allowed the water to penetrate in, claiming that it stopped it, it kept the cairn structure safer, all kinds of nonsense. And in his last book before he died, my friend Jack Roberts spoke about the deterioration he had noticed between when him and Martin Brennan were there back in the early 70s. He says it's very apparent. And yeah, so
yeah.
you know, someone goes over and writes something stupid on chalk and they act like it's the end of the world. But yeah, this is what they're doing. They don't look, and this is the weird thing. Why don't they want us going to these places?
Well, that's it. It's an attempt, I think, to disconnect us from our past. I think that's to cut us off at the root or start again. And some people may think that's conspiratorial, but it's happening. Like they're literally doing it. I don't think they want us to know how connected to the land we actually are. Don't forget a lot of these sites were ancestral places of pilgrimage for thousands of years. There are places where people went for solace and where they gained strength. So to cut us off from them, you leave us marooned and you leave us having to, and for maybe people like us, we can still find our way and we're still okay. But for the masses to be disconnected, it's going to be so powerful and it's going to be so disconnecting and so I don't know, you're creating a population of NPCs almost.
Oh, they do that with the UNICEF thing. They've done that at Newgrange and Bruno Bettelheim at UNICEF. That's just basically they put a fence around it and charge an admission fee to tell you some cold dead story that's just completely speculative. Now Holy Island down in the Shannon has been basically UNICEF, and they got a big fancy boat. The days of going over in a fisherman's boat is gone. Now it's a fancy cruiser that brings the busloads of tourists over. And
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
now talking about Cara Moore up in Sligo is applying for UNICEF status, which is ironic because the politicians who are applying for it, a previous generation wanted to turn it into the town dump. So, like, this goes to show how fickle these NPCs all are. I do agree with you that it's definitely like a Pol Pot year zero thing to cut us off of all our heritage. And, you never existed.
mhm, mhm,
You've nothing. Like
yeah,
you know what? How many Irish people have been taken to say like the Bahia Stone or English person showing Long Meg or whatever and saying, who built that? Your ancestors built that at least 5,500 years ago. That's how long you've been here. It's
yeah,
never
yeah,
explained that way. It's almost like explained as that there's like this is a cartoon race that we have no connection to that did this.
yeah.
And
It's funny because even quite recently in the 1940s, the Liffey Valley at Blessington was flooded to Great Blessington Lakes. Okay, and people were moved out. People who had been there for generations were moved out and just told to go somewhere else. But what's really sad and poignant is when you go onto the National Monuments database and you look at the lakes, you can see these dots where there were cairns, stone circles, standing stones, all now just under the water. Like, isn't that an absolute disgrace?
but even the fact that the hydroelectric dam is built at a place called Pool and Paluca, the pool,
There you go. Yeah,
I mean, just shows the
yeah,
fairy lore that was in that place. In fact, I've seen photographs before the dam was built, and there was a beautiful like fair bridge built across it to allow access to the other side of the hill, and it
yeah,
looked absolutely magical before it was turned into
yeah,
a hydropower station. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
you see this everywhere. I mean, it's got to the point now. If I was to find the next Newgrange or Note accidentally in a bog here somewhere, I wouldn't tell them.
I know, I can
No,
understand it.
I don't want my name in the paper. I don't want to be the person that's credited with the discovery. I would say I put the sphagnum moss back on top and say, stay. This is the wrong time for you to
Yeah,
come alive. Now you say all that, but there's
yeah,
another side to it. I digress there for a second. From the more kind of spiritual element, I haven't spoken to like my friend Maria Wheatley about this and what's going on in England. In England, the English heritage are now going around Avebury asking people, "What are you doing here?" And if you say, "I'm just looking at the stones," oh, okay. if you say something like, "Oh, I'm praying to the ancestors," well, no, this is not a religious site. You really shouldn't be here doing that. Now, the theory is that these sites are somehow in a kind of a Nigel Neal way, which I'm absolutely not adverse to,
Mhm.
waking up.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly possible. It's certainly we've always been told that they're energetic vortexes almost, bring something up or else bring something down, depending. But just as an aside there, about finding if you found the tomb, I remember I worked in a museum a few years ago, and I remember this guy came in before, and he was after finding Roman coins, and he wouldn't tell the curator of the museum where he found them. He just wanted to know were they real. And there was an ongoing thing about it, like trying to put pressure on the guy to say where he got them. But I never found out in the end. I
Oh, good.
gone from the museum after that. But there you go. Like it's another one of those things. And people often came into me when I was there, and they would say, "We have this on our land, but we haven't told anybody. It's a standing stone, or I found this." And they come in with these things, these questions, and they think that you wouldn't know. They'd be like, "What would this be if I found a thing and it was like a long type of sword thing and it had this on it?" And you'd be like, "Why did you find it?" No, no, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. So people are like waking up to that.
Good. They're right too. Well, it's like in Sardinia, they find giant bones all over the place. And you call up the university, they go, "Oh, yeah, thanks very much." They get like, you never hear of them ever again. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
giants. But another one is, do you ever notice how many of them are on, not just on Ireland, but on military bases in the Glen of Amal here? Just about
yeah.
every
That's right.
circle in Sweden is on an Air Force base, which is weird.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
and then Stonehenge is right at the middle of a military area. I haven't found that in.
yeah. I don't think it's coincidental, really, and as an aside, isn't huge sections of the Grand Canyon now cut off to the public?
Yeah, didn't they find all like something that was described as being like ancient Egyptian? Oh,
Yeah,
America's full of megaliths. I mean, back in
yeah,
Lovecraft's time, he speaks about the stone circle on top of Sentinel Hill, which is a real stone circle in Heath in Western Massachusetts. And this is
yeah,
just classic, brilliant Lovecraft. He goes, attributed to the Indian population, although some more eccentric types tried to claim it's from a more ancient, a more older civilization. And what he's doing,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, this was built by the same stuff. But when I was in Maine, the red paint people that of like New of Stonehenge were also found there. So there's the America BC thing that like that people are doing is bang on. There's definitely something going
oh,
on.
yeah,
But anyway,
definitely.
I was going to say I've never been to the one in the Glen of Amal. Now what's the one on the hill there? Because every time I've ever went, the red flag was up. You know, when the firing, you get blown up by
Yeah, 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 yeah.
or an
But
artillery.
there are a few places around the Glen of Amal. Like you have Nikeen Own Stone, which is probably one of the biggest Own Stone. It's like a big heart shaped stone. Then obviously you're where you're close to, like you're close to Seafin, I suppose. Seafin and Sea Finnegan on top of the cairns there as well. You got Log Naquilla. There's something on top of Log Naquilla. Um, whatever it is, there's a book came out. A guy called Wright wrote a book, Travels Through Wicklow. I think it came out in the 1840s or 1820s, maybe. And like he talks about a cromlech on top of Lugnaquilla. But it seems like someone that has built the cairn, the more recent cairn seems to be built on top of it. So for whatever reason that was, but we have a document from 1825 saying that there is a Druid's altar on top of it. So
Well, there's another one. There's the transmitter built on top of Kapur, the big TV transmitter. I think that's built.
yeah,
Someone told me there was a cairn on top of that as well. I think there was cairns in all the mountains and all the hills. All
oh, definitely,
it's
definitely,
like the energy coming up through the cairn, up through the huge TV transmitter being put.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, geez, you're talking about Nigel Neal. That's definitely his territory.
You want to know the real Nigel Neal one is this one up here in Sligo was it on the Black Mountain transmitter and was put up in the 70s to broadcast propaganda into Northern Ireland. And even a guy who's a band called Black Mountain Transmitter, but that's all in the Kerry Mountains where it's full of megaliths. So you're in Nigel Neal territory again.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But like, there's so many people out there who kind of had this sense of hauntology. Like, for example, Robert Aikman, who's known as a writer of ghost stories. But I was reading his books recently, and they're very much folklore, fairy lore, demonology in that much more ancient sense, you know. And he reminds me of Lovecraft in that way. I think he's someone that probably can have build a whole mythology around his work, you know.
Yeah.
So again, it's just a case of people having to reappraise and to not take the previous interpretations of his work as being the only one. You know, go back and look at it yourself because he's writing about really dark folklore here, you know, and magic and the occult as well.
I see. I know. We've talked about this before. I see all that stuff as the same.
Yeah,
When I'm doing the megaliths, when I'm doing the magic stuff, when I'm doing the fairy lore, when I'm interested in the aliens or whatever, the ghosts or whatever you want to call it. To me, it's all. You were talking to Kate on Hare and the Hawthorne there, and at the end, you were just basically saying like it's the same thing, really. And
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't tell one from the other. It's like I don't know whether I was over influenced by like Nigel Neal and things like that growing up. If I was, I'm very glad I was because it brought me to a very wonderful place in life. But yeah, to me, it's almost like that's the secret. You know, when you start out, you tend to be very individualized. Most people get into UFOs, some people get into cryptozoology, some people get into fairies. But by the end, by the time you've like had a decade or two inside it, you suddenly realize it's all the same shit. It's all the same thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. Like I feel that way myself. And you know, people that we read, like John Keel, would say the same. Like he saw no separation between demonology, UFOs, fairies. You know, even witchcraft, magic. You know, so
Tremendous hostility that he got, and so did Rosemary Ellen Guiley when she said that went to UFO conferences. Says, no, no, these are spiritual forces. There's
yeah,
not,
yeah,
not
yeah, yeah,
spaceship
yeah,
worlds. And now you have even like Tucker Carlson has a video I came up the other day, and it says the UFO thing is a spiritual phenomena. It's
yeah, yeah, exactly.
it's like that thing where you know you're a hero, but you live long enough to become a villain. I feel like that's.
Yeah,
I'm watching mainstream media now. Mainstream alternative, and I'm thinking, my God, here's things I was thinking about 20 years ago, and they're now talked about.
yeah. It's unbelievable. Like I mean, the mainstream is becoming haunted itself, and it was like who was the Fritz Lieber, the writer. He had this theory of I forget what he called it. The crux of it was that in the end everything becomes haunted. That you can't stop whatever this outer world is from coming into to our world. You know, you can try, but it eventually does take over. You know.
I agree. Even AI has gone the same way too, as well. It's like there's a.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that I don't know. We haven't spoke about it, but if you haven't read that Ragastani book, it's a very strange book called Cyclonopedia about the oil being sentient under the Middle East, and it's basically a Lovecraftian god at war with the sun. And you're reading this stuff, and you go, "My God, this is as out there as it gets." Especially that you use this kind of like academic language to describe it. And then you find out that like 8 years ago, the New School in New York, which is like not the Fabians, the other one, Frankfurt School, had a big, huge art exhibition and conference on the cyclonopedia fiction. So
yeah, yeah.
academia has gone into like into in it's like this our haunted planet was it that or was the John Keel's book, yeah, our haunted planet.
Yeah, 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 and exactly. And I think uh, perhaps there's this drip release of this type of information that they know, the people like academia, scientists, and so on, and they have to let it out very carefully. And then some of us pick it up and run with it. Some people just choose to ignore it.
Absolutely. I'm glad we picked it up and run with it. The show is coming it's coming to the end of the timer now, David. Listen, this is fantastic. I could have talked for another couple of hours, but
Great chat.
tell people where they can find your stuff.
Well, basically, Facebook and Instagram is where I am with Circle Stories. I still run the Occult Book Review on X and Instagram, but it's not really reviews. I basically just put up covers of new books that I think people will be interested in. So it covers everything from folklore, the occult, spirituality, archaeology. and all of the subjects that we all love. So
You've still got
pretty
all those
important.
videos on YouTube, right, from the occult book review days?
That yeah, yeah, they're still up there. I must give it, yourself, Thomas, time. But like as soon as I dedicated myself more to circle stories, I felt that I could cover enough a lot of the cult topics within that anyway. So
Yeah, it's a good thing to dive into though, because there's lots of books there that I haven't read and other
yeah,
people.
yeah,
So check out the not only the Circle Stories on Instagram and Facebook, but also the Occult Book Review on X, and also what videos still remain on YouTube, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I've never spoke about that David's covered. So you'll get like there's a whole other thing for you to discover there. Okay, so thanks very much, David, and
thanks
we'll
a million, Thomas. It was great to chat.
yeah, we'll talk again soon, and hopefully meet up again soon
Yeah,
somewhere. And keep doing the phenomenal work you do, and
and you too.
thank you very much. And try to navigate this wacky world we live in whatever way we can.
That's it.
Take care.
That's
Bye,
it.
everybody.
Good to